All right, guys, welcome to another podcast. We got the Happy Rabbit Productions crew together again, and we're joined by a really special someone. Charles and I just filmed a movie. This is director Bryce.
Welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Like a really direct intro right there.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's my pleasure to be here, and you guys are awesome to work with. So I'm
Likewise.
ready for questions or topics.
Where
this
do
works.
we begin?
We're pretty chill.
Yeah.
So
I love
this
it.
is more like the hangout. Like we're just chatting and
just
having
chatting
fun,
about
talking
movies
about
and
film.
stuff.
Yeah,
Sweet.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Bryce is a director, but outside of that, I want to know more. Where did you get started in film? Where did this all come about? I know we just met on your last movie, Blessed, but give us a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in the Boston area, and when VHS recorders came out, I had like a high 8 camera at some point.
Oh yeah.
But originally it was like VHS, like the big cameras, right? And my friend had one, so we just started making movies.
Did you have one with the backpack, separate VHS backpack, or was it all built in?
It was all built in.
Okay.
That's cool. It was heavy. It was like, we didn't know what we were doing, but like the movies were actually pretty good. We did like the Labors of Hercules. We did like a movie that we called what was it called? The Leap Year Massacre. So it's a killer that only kills on leap year.
That's awesome.
So he's like really old, you know what I mean? Because he's like, he has to wait,
Every year he only gets a few murders.
No, he has to wait. He has to wait for leap year.
Every
4 years.
He can only murder he's like, man, I picked the wrong holiday. I really want to murder like every year.
That's awesome.
So we had the Valentine's Day massacre. Anyways, lots of movies like that.
Mainly horror?
Yeah, horror and like fantasy type stuff. Yeah.
Nice. That's definitely my avenue too. I love horror films.
Yeah, totally. And it's the thing where if your parents say you can't have that, you immediately want it. So it's like no horror films. I'm like, absolutely, never horror film. Where are they?
As soon as you said that, my mind went. When I was a kid, I wanted to watch the movie It with the clown, like the original.
Absolutely.
And my parents would never let me watch it. And finally, my friend got a copy from his dad. And I remember went in the basement, put it on, sleep over at his house. And I was so scared after watching it. I called my parents to pick me up, and I told my mom I watched it, and it was this thing. But yeah, that's awesome. That's kind of maybe what got me started in horror as well.
We were like, my friends and I, we were like, if someone's getting brutally murdered, we want that. Or if a lady's taking her clothes off. One of those. So
something's going to be a good picture.
So in our neighborhood, it was like none of our children are allowed to see Flashdance. You cannot see Flashdance, right? So Flashdance was this movie about a stripper. Mm-hmm. So we get a copy and we're like, yes! But Flashdance is actually a realistic look at the life of a stripper.
Yeah.
And we're like, what is this?
You're all watching it and just oh.
Why is she sad? When's the dancing and the naked part?
That's awesome.
And it's like, this is ballet. Okay, we're not watching
You guys
this.
are just getting a life lesson.
Yeah.
I can see that.
That's funny.
That's awesome. Well...
But anyways, to answer your question, I also... wrote stuff. So I wrote stories from a very young age, ridiculous stories. I just posted on Instagram this sort of murder, 2-page story, I don't know, action, whatever, as a writing assignment that I got an F because the commas and the semicolons were swapped and everything was misspelled. But in my brain, I'm like, yeah, but the story is good. Who cares about the commas?
Makes sense to the director.
I don't care. Later, I won a statewide writing contest. You had to do a story about the Celtics. And so I wrote a story about a mouse that lived in the rafters of the Boston Garden. And
that's cool.
Yeah, and was the kind of mouse that never dies. So he knew all the players and anyways, I won this contest as a little kid. So I'm like, oh, I can write. And I had no idea how movies were written. I didn't even know that people wrote them. You know what I mean? Because back then, film school where I wasn't really a thing. The idea that you could study filmmaking was foreign to me. So I'm 49. Mm-hmm. So there was Emerson back there, and a couple schools had film programs, but mostly it was like L.A., New York, Chicago. If you wanted to go to film school,
It was a completely different world.
Totally.
Than to try to like get into the industry, even completely different. Like even just shooting a home video, like bust out the Super 8, you know, and then even then, like kind of a big deal to like waste the money on film at that time, even, you know, if you could afford it, kind of a thing. And so it's like, totally different than what it is now. Like you didn't have an iPhone, you could just pull it out of your pocket. And
I was gonna say my like first video camera that I shot with was one of those like flip video cameras or GoPro. So like I didn't even have to go through that of like, one, affording it, two, getting 3 or 4 friends together to try to shoot something. I would just go in my basement. So I was kind of lucky.
And then like the way that we're editing is like you put the tape in this one and you're recording another one and you're like, and it's like so dumb. Like, you know what I mean? It's like
now you just like, it's like to the cloud.
So what we did without knowing it is do oneers because you didn't have to edit them. Do you know what I mean? Because editing was such a like, we were like, oh, I hate editing. Let's just shoot it all in one shot. But we didn't know that was cool. We just did it because we didn't want to edit.
That's a good point. Like when you're starting out in filmmaking and you just have a camera, and we always tell people to get out and just go try stuff. But if you have a camera and you're kind of doing some things with your friends, testing some stuff, finding things that look cool, you may find yourself 10, 15 years down the road on an actual set, and they're actually doing what you did and just calling it maybe something different and doing it in a different style. But
totally.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because I think what happened like in the history of film is a lot of this stuff is intuitive, right? So it's like, how did these guys originally know how to make movies? And it's like, they just use the tools to tell a story. And it's like, well, this is how you tell a story with these tools. And they've continued because they work, right? And then someone breaks the mold and finds a new thing. It's like, oh, we can go backwards, or we can cut in and out. And, you know, Orson Welles with Citizen Kane, people, they thought that the wrong reel started with the end of the movie because he dies, right? But no, that's actually, he's just telling it non-linear, you know? And that it took like decades for that to catch on as a thing, but now most movies do something like that, you know?
Well, you bring up a good point. As a director, there's like the way of doing things, you know, it works. And then there's the way of like going outside the box to try to just throw your little spice on it. Where, as a director, have you found yourself like really wanting to push the boundaries, or just like really following the rules to make sure it works?
So, as Charles said, it was very different about getting into filmmaking. So I was a writer, right? But as you're writing, you picture it in your brain, what it should look like. And you don't know at that point, I don't know that these are shots. They're just images. I don't know what to call them, right? I don't know how to translate that to making it into a movie. But the pictures are in my mind. So I had a great experience. I was living in St. George, Utah, and there was an article in the newspaper, and it said, former head of NFL Films coming to Dixie State College to start a film program. And I'm like 33 years old or something like that at that point. So I go meet this guy, Phil Tuckett, who made all of these NFL films and like shot all the football stuff in the movie Rudy. So he's a filmmaker, right? So he comes out, I'm like, I don't really want to go back to college. He's like, just do it. You'll direct. I'll teach you how to direct. He's like, it's so easy. I'm like, okay. And he's like, here's the key. You have to know enough to talk to the people who are really good at what they do. But it's better if you're the least talented person in terms of the actual technical filmmaking.
No, that's a great point, though, because we say all the time, like, hire people around, like, know what you're good at and know what you're not good at, and then hire people around you that are that much better at what you do, and the end result will be that much more.
Yeah, so in my mind, it was like, if I want to direct movies, I have to know how to shoot them, design them, edit, like, you know what I mean? It was so daunting to me. And so on my first film, the first narrative thing that I shot was a feature. So I'd done, I mean, like a real project, not like a student or like whatever, or a short. I didn't even shoot a short film.
You went right into features. You jumped in.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so I made this movie called Ben Banks. It's about a stoner living in St. George named Ben Banks, who's a real person, who I met in the film program.
Shout out Ben.
And he'd been at Dixie State for like 12 years. And I'm like, dude, it was a 2-year program. And he's like, I just like it.
He maxed it out.
Yeah. And so like we got Misha Barton to play his love interest. Melora Hardin from The Office was in it. Sal Masekela, who does like extreme sports, was in it. It was like surreal, right? And I have no clue how a set works or anything like that. So the very first thing that I shoot is this scene with Ben and another guy who's playing himself, so not actors, and Melora Hardin, who's Jan from The Office, right?
Right.
So we're there, and we start directing, and she's like, I have an issue with my character. I'm like, oh. She's like, come here. So we go back into this room, and she's like, you've never done this before. I'm like, and she explained like how the more you say when you don't know, the worse it is.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you don't really know what you want, just don't pretend that you do. Actually say, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right? So I go down that way of doing it, which is actually not the way to do it, I think, in my opinion. I understand that for the actors, so what I'm saying is that like directing the crew and directing the actors are very, 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 very different.
100%.
Yeah.
And
fully different language too.
if the crew has a feeling that you're not sure or like you don't know, it's not good. It makes them feel like insecure, right? Like if he doesn't know, then who does?
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, but with actors, being that rigid doesn't really work because they don't feel like they have the freedom to then make it their own or carve their thing out. And what was interesting is when it came to directing the performances, Melora and what she taught me about that was so valuable. Like it was like, I'll never forget the lessons of that. You know what I mean? So the way that she told me to be was actually good on my first film because I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah. So if I went forward and I was like, I know what's going on, it would have been a disaster. So for that project, me being like, I'm not sure, worked because it was true. Mm-hmm. And so if it's true and you really don't know what you're doing, pretending that you do is not good.
You know, Charles, that was one of the first things he said as we were branching into like him using the Trinity and me ACing for him. He was like, look, if you don't know, just tell me, let's communicate and I'll teach you the right way. And then going forward, you know. And I tell that to everyone I work with and all of our ACs. It's like we're working with really expensive equipment. Last thing we want is a delay in our day. Just communicate. And then you'll know the right way and then there's no question.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we have said in previous episodes where we're like, fake it till you make it, right? But there obviously there's certain jobs where that works and then other jobs where that doesn't work.
But I'm talking specifically about story.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
like the technical stuff, I'm still faking it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
And I'll continue to do that. Sure, I know what you're talking about. Let's do that.
That's what
I
I
have
do
no
too.
idea.
Let's be honest.
Right. But if I don't know story-wise or like scene and like the feel and that kind of thing, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
Who's directing it if I don't have that?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
So on the first one, it was more about like feelings. Because I have no frame of reference to describe like even like sizes of shots. I know nothing.
Yeah.
But I know the feeling and I can describe how it looks in my brain. And the DP was this guy, Chris Saul, who's really, his career's taken off. And he was awesome because he works like that. I was trying to speak cinematography language to him. He's like, no. He's like, I don't even talk like that. Just knock it off. And he's the kind of guy like that all the editors hate because he never stops shooting. So I'll be like, cut. And he's like, he's still shooting. He's going over and he's shooting like leg chairs and he's shooting like the ceiling. He's like, well, you might need it. I'm like, okay. And the funny thing is a lot of that stuff is in the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
And I think what happened is he realized this guy doesn't really know what he's doing. He's going to need protection in the edit. He's going to need cutaways, a lot of them.
We've actually done that on set. There's a few times like, there's a few times where something may get cut a little short and we're just not going to cut it quite yet and let it roll for an extra 5 seconds because we know they're going to need it. So yeah, that's kind of funny. We actually do that too and just kind of keep it between camera.
Yeah.
We know the editors want it.
But the problem is getting footage that's not labeled. so that the editor is, what is this?
Right.
You know what I
It
mean?
usually gets thrown away, especially with an experienced editor.
Totally.
If they don't know what it is, they're not.
Oh, an
mad at
experienced
it.
editor's like, yeah, what's this? No scene, no camera log. Yeah, no, we'll just throw it away.
Yeah.
Right.
And that kind of goes to what we've talked about before, is like the different levels and different productions, and like some things are like very to the book, and then some things are very untraditional. It just really depends on what kind of set you're on.
So, like, I've developed like my own theory of directing, and it's heavily influenced by what happened when film went from primarily like a producer-driven industry, where like the director is kind of like working for the studio, and they're kind of like a technician, and they were primarily directing the actors. And the producer and the cinematographer are doing the shots and how that all, and the director is just kind of like a worker, right? The French New Wave changed that, where directors are putting personal stamps on films, and Truffaut develops this auteur theory, right, which is realized in Hitchcock, which is this art form and this medium works best when one person has a vision and you follow that vision. So that's one theory of filmmaking. There's other theories, groups, no one's in charge, like, but the best movies ever made, if you think about it, the director had a vision. It's a singular vision.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree with that 100%.
And so the mistake that I made was my vision needs to be like those guys' vision. That's what make the movie good. And it's actually not true. The opposite is what's true. The only way that the movie will be good is if I do it my way. And that can't be me trying to mimic Steven Spielberg or whoever. I can steal shots and stuff like that. That's what we do. You know, homage, references, whatever you want to call it. We're just we're stealing their shots or whatever. But it's great. They did it too. Like if you watch Jaws, that Zolly shot is from Vertigo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like that tradition goes on. And so it's a really hard thing. I mean, I'm 49 and I'm kind of just realizing this, having done it on Blessed, is if you don't even have to trust that your idea is the right idea. You just have to trust that it's yours. Because here's the thing is that like even if you don't intend it to, you reveal something about yourself when you direct a film. And so if you embrace that idea that the thing that's going to make this thing work is if it's me doing it, then it doesn't matter. You don't sit
I
there,
love that.
You don't sit there and evaluate like, well, but is my idea good? For me, that you start thinking like that and like you won't make the movie. Because I learned this in writing. If you're a perfectionist, you'll never have a first draft, which means you'll never be a writer. You're writing, but to me, a writer, other people will read what you wrote. You know what I mean? Like that's what makes a writer, right? It's like someone's reading what you wrote. And so for me, the entire thing that unlocked writing and directing was this concept: permission to suck, which is just do it. Put the thing down, get the draft down, whatever the idea is, get the shot list written. It's going to be garbage. It doesn't matter. Just start working. And for me, it's about building clay, right? Building something that you can work with. Because if you don't have that, there's nothing to work on. So whether it's the script, shot list, talking to the production designer, whatever it is, as I formulate those ideas, I don't question whether or not they're good at that stage. I just put it out, right? An interesting thing happens is that like some of it is garbage, right? You just get rid of it. But usually the best things in the script and in the movie come from that stuff, where it's like judgment free. It's like, this could be the worst thing ever written, and that's fine.
I feel like that could be applied to so many things in life and so many things within every industry. Like that's pretty cool. I love that.
Yeah, we're getting deep with Bryce Clark here.
Sorry, guys.
No,
it's great.
This is great. Like
I also love pizza.
we did order pizza, which should be here. We may have it on the podcast, maybe not. But, no, that's really cool, though. I loved how you actually were vulnerable and you jumped into that and you explained that, because not a lot of people do, and it kind of gives people an inside view of what a director is going through and what they're experiencing and what that may look like. Which I'm excited to go through a lot of those steps myself. My 20-year goal is to be a director down the road, and hopefully sooner than that. But yeah, that's really cool. I love that kind of like insider perspective.
So here's another concept that I've embraced. If I've never seen a bad movie, my appreciation of good movies would not be very. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of have to know the crappy stuff in order to.
Well, if all you see is like Scorsese movies and like Hitchcock, they become old. It's like, yeah, whatever, that's a movie.
Yep.
But like if like you watch Ishtar and then you watch Goodfellas, it's like, whoa, Goodfellas is incredible,
Yeah.
right? And so I think of film as like this ecosystem where all of the people that are doing stuff in it, because it's art, there's no right. There's actually no good either. It's all opinion. Like we can like set standards. That's what a good movie is, but it's just your
somebody's
opinion.
That's
Yeah,
your
exactly.
take on it.
But if
yeah.
enough people have the same opinion, it becomes like truth. Like,
Yeah.
this is, but it's all just subjective. That's the beautiful thing about art. That's the beauty, is that there are no rules. There's no like, you've done it. This sculpture is now qualifies as art.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
there is really nothing. We were talking about this with college and an art degree. At the end of the day, there's no one saying your art is great, like your art's professional. That's just a matter of everyone's collaborative opinion of you as an artist.
Yeah.
So to speak. Yeah, that's weird.
So Bryce, tell us about some of your projects, and then we'll talk about your most recent project.
Let me just finish this idea real quick.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually important. So there's this filmmaker, Ed Wood. You guys heard of Ed Wood?
That sounds familiar.
So there's a movie, Johnny Depp plays Ed Wood. And he made a movie called Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is considered, until The Room was made, that was considered the worst movie of all time. Right? So in the movie, Ed Wood calls the head of the studio who's watched his film. And he says, "What do you think of my picture?" And you don't hear the other guy. And Ed Wood goes, "Worst movie ever made?" And he pauses. He says, "Well, my next one will be better."
Yeah.
And I love that mentality. And the reality is that without Plan 9 from Outer Space, Aliens isn't as good.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I love the way how you put it into an ecosystem, because it's so true. And at every stage, it's so important. And if you don't have people learning, you don't have people being professionals. And if you don't have people being professionals teaching the people learning to inspire new people to get in, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah. So I've made 2 movies about which several people have said, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Right? So like Ben Banks is, I love the reviews of Ben Banks, because one of them is like, this guy has no idea what he's doing. You know what I mean? And then the people who connect with the story, like it's about a guy who meets a girl and finds out that she has a past in pornography, right? And how does he handle that? And so it's about like second chances, redemption, forgiveness, whatever. And people connect to that. And they're like, I love this movie. I'm showing it to my nephew who's trying, whatever, right? So it's like polar.
Yeah.
And like, who's right? Is
Right.
the guy who's like, Bryce Clark's movie is garbage? Yes, he's right. And the guy who's like, this changed my life? Yeah, he's
Yeah.
right too. But the way that I look at it is, I'm in it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in the game. So that's what matters. And like, not everybody can be to Paul Thomas Anderson. And if they could, it wouldn't be special.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying that like I want to be mediocre or I'm trying to not be. I'm just being me. And wherever that lands isn't up to me.
Yeah.
So I've just let all of that go. But I was able to do that because it's really painful when you first start to read a bad review. It's it hurts like on a level that I wasn't prepared for. It's deeply personal, right? For me anyways. But I learned to have the bad reviews be as meaningful and important to me as the good ones. So I have the first review. This is how it starts. I think I'm quoting this verbatim. This is a letter to the director of Ben Banks, Bryce Clark. Dude, your movie sucks.
Dude.
But don't give up filmmaking. And then the whole review is about what works. And I love that guy did the
That's
review
cool,
that way.
That's
yeah.
really neat.
His name, I don't want to get it wrong. I think his name is Sean Means.
Mm-hmm.
He's a reviewer for the Salt Lake Tribune, I think. I may have that wrong. The way that he wrote his review was such a gift to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because it's a terrible review, right? He's not recommending the movie in any way to anyone.
But instead of throwing you down, kicking dirt on you, though, he's like, look, this is the truth, which a lot of people in film don't really do. You know, it's a lot of fluffy crap. And he's like, look, this is how it is, and this is how it could be better. And that's pretty special in its own self. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you saved it? Like,
Oh, I have it, yeah.
That's cool. You should frame it or something.
Yeah.
Like, get it printed.
It's pretty funny.
I love that.
Yeah. So
And-
thanks. That may not even be his name. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's Sean something, but yeah. Thanks, Sean.
And then I know you've done quite a few, but on our most recent project is where we met. Explain what that was, and we're actually in post-production on that project, but tell a little bit about that and what that was like.
So Blessed is like a haunted house ghost story that takes place in one location, this mansion in Salt Lake City where we shot it. And it's two characters. One is this girl who finds out that she inherits this estate. So she goes to the mansion to see what it is. And it's during the COVID lockdown. And so everything's like put away because this mansion works as like a school for at-risk girls, right? But all that stuff's in storage. There's a caretaker who's lived there her whole life named Melinda. The girl's name is Lydia. Lydia comes to spend a few nights in the house, and immediately it's clear that the house is haunted. And so it's about the two of them trying to figure out like what's going on. And Lydia is still grieving the loss of her mother, who died young, unexpectedly. And it's about her connecting with her mom. And the idea that our dead go on, right? That they're not just gone, that they're somewhere, and that I don't know how it works, because I do believe that's a real thing, right? Like spirits and things like that. But I don't know how that works. I can't explain it. But the idea that like when someone dies, that's it. That doesn't ring true to me. And so the movie for me is about Lydia accepting that possibility.
You know, this movie hit home for me, and I actually didn't want to work. And I know you know this. My father passed away in October right before we started shooting this movie. And it was unexpected, and I was completely lost, and I didn't know where to go. And Charles calls me up, and he's like, "You're working this movie with me." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I didn't get sent the script yet or anything, and I was like, I pretty much Charles was like, "You're working it." He didn't give me an option, which I'm grateful for, because I probably would have just sat at home. And when I read the script and I started diving into it, I connected to it on a much different level that I didn't really share with while we were shooting. But I really felt like I was in the character's shoes, and like I really felt that whole... It was really cool to see her acting it out and experiencing it through the film, and then it was cool to kind of be shooting it knowing that I went through something so similar, and it was a really special experience for me too. So I wanted to tell you that, and in the big picture, it's just really cool to look back on. So
Thanks, man. I mean, another part of the story that was important to me, religion is kind of like, it's not about religion, but it's a part of it. And I wanted to like tear down this idea that there are certain kinds of people that qualify for religious experiences, right? That there's something you have to do to. I think that's such garbage, man. And I'm not going to get into the culture here or things like that, But that idea that like worthiness is performative, like I reject that. I think that everyone has that within them, right?
So you play a little bit on that in the script in this movie, and one of the characters is LDS, one of the characters is not LDS. In traditional horror haunting movies, mainly they're, a certain religion, Catholic based, for that to happen. And one thing I thought that was really cool coming into this movie was we are going from an LDS perspective and the hauntings, and it's not a religious movie. It's not based off of that. That's not even really like the whole point of it. But it's cool to like see her experience through that.
Yeah.
Which you don't really get in that kind of movie.
So I'm a member of the LDS Church, and like for me, when I see us represented in entertainment, it's usually like an accountant who's like,
very
like
stereotypical manners,
or they're like a polygamous wacko who's murdering people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Some FLDS
or like the FBI is hiring them because they don't drink. They can be trusted. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And so for me, I don't think of The Conjuring as a Catholic movie. You know what I mean? It's a horror film. I wanted to do a movie where the characters are LDS, but it is not an LDS film.
It's just a fact of the film.
Yeah,
kind of
it
thing.
just
It's not
happened
a
to be
center
LDS.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, and I thought that was so cool going into it. Like, that was smart as a director to like throw that in and be like, we're gonna twist it up a little bit.
Well, there's a line at the end that to me is kind of like my sort of, maybe I'm giving too much away, but
Don't give it away because the movie's not out
Hopefully
yet.
we can show some stuff too.
But there's
like,
a way to talk about it. It doesn't give anything away. But it's this concept about the straight and narrow path. Straight and narrow, which implies that there's only one path, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so narrow. What if it's narrow because it's only my path?
We all just like, whoa.
Right? It's not narrow because there's only one way. It's narrow because it's my way.
Interesting. I never looked at it like that.
Because what we do is we look at people like, well, he's not on the right path. It's like, what do you mean? It's his What are you talking about? That's his path.
yeah.
How do you know if it's right or wrong?
Exactly. How do we know?
Who's to judge for it?
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
look like this other path. It's like, okay. But by the way, no human being lives that path.
Yeah.
So everyone falls short and is like, oh, I'm a horrible person. It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, that's cool.
Was Blessed one that you wrote yourself?
So Blessed, my wife's mom died when she was 13. And so I told my wife the parameters of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Girl shows up, there's an older woman, but the backstory and all of the things, the interaction with the mom and the little boy spirit and things like that, my wife wrote the story.
That's neat.
And then I came in and with her tweaked it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took that and wrote the script. And so from her story to like my script and then the film, things changed and it became mine.
Yeah.
Which is what you do as a director, right?
You want to put your stamp on it.
It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't happen, the movie won't be good. And so it's actually kind of hard for my wife because she was like, but that's not like the story. I'm like, I know, but the story is not the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was as gentle as I could be and once she understood that her contribution is like huge and significant. And just because it doesn't like look the same, the intent and the heart and the emotion and the feeling is all there.
It doesn't take away
The
from
spinal,
anything.
the spinal cord of the movie is built, and then
Correct.
you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do we have any idea of where this movie will be distributed on yet? Or are we still toying around with that?
So there's some things that I probably shouldn't talk about in terms of like, my dad's my business partner. And anyways, there's some things that we're doing, but our goal right now is to finish it, make it the best movie we can make. And then we have access to different options.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
There will definitely be links and stuff for you guys to see this movie. I'm sure Charles and I will be posting about it once it's out. Charles DP'd it. I firsted it. So just stay tuned on that, and everything you've heard us talking about, you'll be able to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bryce, if you have to pick a favorite moment from any of your movies, what would it be?
That's a hard one.
Okay, so I did make an LDS film
Nice.
called Mission Stories.
Here
but
in
I did
Utah?
it-
Oh, I've heard of that.
yeah.
Yeah, Mission Stories is big in Utah.
So it's an anthology film with 3 stories of missionaries, right? And one of them is my story. And when I was 19, the church was like, "Yeah, you're not going on a mission. We're not letting you." I was like, "Okay," because I was doing whatever I was doing, right? And I left the church for a while, whatever. And during that time, I had a friend who joined the church, and this missionary taught him, right? And we all got to know each other. That missionary goes back to Utah and becomes like a heroin addict. His life falls apart, like everything.
Sounds
But
about
my
right.
friend who joined the church stays in touch with this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Calls, emails, letters every week, just saying, "Hey, man, I'm here. Like, there's someone in the world that cares about you." So this guy gets excommunicated from the church. He's in jail. His life falls apart. But my friend Mark keeps reminding him, "There's someone that cares about you." Eventually, this guy gets his life together and gets sober and is going to get rebaptized. So this is a very LDS story, right?
Mhm.
So Mark calls me and he's like, because now I live out here in Utah. He's like, "Hey, I'm coming out to Utah to baptize Dave." And I'm like, "Who's Dave?" And he's like, "Remember the missionary that taught me?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." So he's like, "Can you come and have lunch with us?" I'm like, "Sure." So I'm sitting there and I'm going to reveal something about myself. I'm a recovering alcoholic. At that lunch, I was not in recovery. So this dude sits down, and I remember him vaguely. This guy looks like he's been through a war. Like every inch of his arm is scarred from cutting, suicide attempts. Like, this guy tried to kill himself 14 times. Like, just
Which in reality, I mean, like coming back from that is like
hard.
It is war.
It is war.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As he's sitting there telling me his story, it clicks in my brain. If this guy can do it, you can do it. And so that's what gave me kind of like the hope to go into treatment. And I've been sober since. It's coming up on four years.
Congratulations.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations.
And
That's
so
awesome.
I was like, I want to make an LDS film that's about a heroin addict who's trying to kill himself and an alcoholic who needs help and how that happens.
It's something not a lot of LDS movies talk about.
Yeah, and I get it, right? Because people have they're trying to portray something in a positive way. For me, the issue with that is it's not real. So I don't connect to it. It's like, here's like a fantasy version of life, right? Where it ends and like everyone's hugging and everything's great. But life isn't an event. It's not a moment. It's a process, right? It's like a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that movie was about the ways in which spirituality, religion, and faith are not about worthiness or qualifying or whatever. They're about love. And they're about seeing people as they really are. And most people in that restaurant probably looked at Dave and saw like a broken person, right? But I looked at that dude and I saw a warrior. You know what I mean? Like, that dude, like, my goodness, he's a titan, and nobody knows.
I was about to say, and it's probably cool. Like, I'm sure there's thousands of experiences like this out there, but he doesn't know he changed your life. He doesn't know what he did for you, or maybe he does.
He does because of the movie.
Oh, so he found out later.
So he read the script, right? I'm going to tell you the story. He read the script and invited me to come up. He lives up in Bountiful, and talk to him. So I go up there and I talk to him, and he's like, the fact that like all this stuff that I did helps someone, like, gives my life meaning. 5 days later, he died. Now, I'm not going to go into the death, but it's not. There's no closure. There's no. Do you know what I mean? Like we don't really know what happened.
Oh, crazy.
That is wild.
But his mother contacted me and said, I want the family to watch the movie. So we made arrangements to have a theater up there for them to go watch it, right? So they did. And that whole family had had all this turbulence around Dave. And like, just like sadness and regret and like shame and like, you know what I mean? We couldn't help him. Hopelessness, that kind of thing. And they watched the movie, right? And I bookended the anthology with the flashback stuff when I was young, and then when we're adults. So the movie ends with me making the character that's based on me making a phone call or a text that says I need help. And for me, my favorite shot in the film is the push on that when it becomes clear that that's what's happening at the end. That's my favorite moment, because it's not exactly what happened in my life, but I feel it more than any other shot. That shot says exactly what I intended it to say. So when his family watches the movie, like, it completely changes how they look at Dave.
You gave him closure. Like, that's special.
And the mom, mom sends me this text, and it's the kind of thing that like, it just like turns your insides to liquid. It's like, oh my gosh, that's why I made this movie. You know what I mean?
It gives it a little purpose.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It gives you
Thanks
a
for
reason
sharing
of
that.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that is the reason why we do what we do, is to hopefully reach out and change people's lives.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. But at least that's why I make movies, you know. I love doing the art, and getting those emotional responses out of people is the reason why I love doing what I do.
Yeah.
That's special.
And what I love about film is that what we're talking about is a huge part of it, but there's also the element of like losing yourself in a story. So even if it's not like an emotional gut punch or whatever, like I just watched the Puss in Boots movie.
It's really good. By
You know
the
what I
way.
mean?
Yeah.
You
Like-
watch every cartoon, Charles.
But it's like,
It was good.
but
it
it's
was
like,
good.
that's actually meaningful to me. Like, it's a silly cartoon movie, but there's elements of that are
He's
like,
always calling me out. He's like, dude, have you watched this new like cartoon? And I'm like, what? And he's like, dude, it's so good, the meaning and everything. And I get it because you have a daughter, but like, it's funny. Charles is always up to date on the cartoons.
yeah. But movies, more than any other art form, have the ability to elicit feelings, right? Emotions that, like, when you read a book, you're kind of doing it. You know what I mean? But if a movie is made the way that I'm talking about by a director, which they are, and the director has a vision, it doesn't matter if it's emotionally moving or it's just thrilling or it's fun, right? That's important to me anyways. And I think about all of the memories that I have around movies with my friends, with my family. And to me, I don't know, like, I would not want to live in a world where there's no movies.
I couldn't agree more. Literally, like, the movies are my life. Like, this is my life. If there wasn't this, I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that, going along those same lines, though, like, there's a reason why we go to the movie theaters with people that we want to be with, too,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
because we're sharing those emotional experiences with each other, you know? And it's like, it means something when you share it with other people, as opposed to just like going to the movie theater and sitting there by yourself and watching whatever, you know? But when you sit there with your friends, all of a sudden it's taken to a whole nother level.
Yeah. And there's another element of the theater that's important to me, is that when I watch a movie at home, I'm controlling the movie. I can pause it. I can, you know what I mean? I can watch it over 6 days if I want.
Right.
At the theater, the movie runs me. Right? If
I agree
Good
with
point.
that.
Yeah, I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm watching a movie at home, I'm doing 12 other things and
Mhm.
doing. But if you pull out your phone in a movie theater, yeah, you don't
Don't
do
do
that. So I love it. I agree with that too. If I'm in a movie, I'm locked in for those like 2 hours opposed to being at home.
Yeah, so like a month ago, I go to the theater and I sit down, I put on the 3D glasses, and I'm at James Cameron's mercy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I love that.
Which is-
That's a good way of like thinking of theaters like
Which
that.
which is a great person to be, you know what I mean? Like
Good hands to be in.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, we couldn't thank you enough for coming in today, and I want to have you in again and talk more in detail about the process of creating a film and script writing and what all of that looks like, which I'm sure a bunch of people have some questions for. But
For sure.
thank you so much for today and diving in on some stuff and bringing us in the mind of Bryce.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. And like I said, like you guys were awesome. Charles, like, if I knew, you know what I mean?
Oh, thank you.
But because it's like you just don't know until you work with someone, right? Like,
sure.
You just don't know. But if I knew, it would have been like, there's no one, nobody else is shooting this. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't know.
Thank you.
Now I know. And dude, you like, we won't go into it, but some of the conversations, man, like,
No, we hit it off right
Yeah.
off the bat. We're like,
Yeah.
we speak the same language.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful to be a part of your film. And like, now I'm able to do the VFX on it with you guys. And
Yep.
like, I just couldn't be more stoked on it.
Which
Yeah.
we're gonna bring Bryce back when Blessed is actually able to come out, and,
Yeah.
and we'll do a shout out to it. And
Oh, and
hopefully
yeah, we
show
could do
show
some like
footage
scenes and how he broke
Yeah.
down scenes and how he created some stuff.
Yeah.
100%. I'd love to
Yeah.
do that with you guys. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
guys
much,
for
Bryce.
watching. Thanks for coming in. Peace.